Good evening. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Askwith Forum. My name is James Antony. I am a faculty member here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the faculty director of its higher education program. This evening, I'll also serve as the moderator for our panel discussion on college athletics. Before I get to introducing our panelists, I would like to say a few words about the Askwith Forum series for those of you who might be joining for the first time or watching online for the first time. The Askwith Forums help strengthen the intellectual life of the school through conversation, debate, and the exchange of ideas. They are also a way to open our doors to welcome members of the greater Harvard community and the general public. Just a big plug, on Friday, October 27th, we have a special noontime Askwith Forum that will feature TED Talk-style presentations by 5 of our own faculty here on their international or comparative work. A panel discussion and audience Q&A will follow, and the event is entitled Learning to Change the World. It's part of a worldwide week at Harvard, which celebrates and showcases Harvard's global presence and impact. So this evening's Askwith Forum provides us the opportunity to think about college athletics. Only in the United States do colleges and universities have such a direct connection to sport. In this nation, hundreds of thousands of students play for their schools. Many play in sports that will never attract widespread national attention or television coverage, let alone spectators actually watching contests. The majority of college athletes playing today actually do so in what we call the Division II or the Division III programs, where broad-scale visibility is unheard of, and where some might argue the balance between academics and athletics is, well, more balanced. Typically, it is competition in what we call the Division I, especially in basketball and football, that captures the attention of the broader public and, for better or worse, tends to shape the national narrative about the pluses and minuses of college athletics. A small number of Division I programs generate the lion's share of revenues associated with college sports, and some might argue most of the challenges. People, and by people, I also mean even our youngest kids in elementary schools, watch what happens within big-time athletic programs, and this tends to shape youth sport too, influencing the attitudes and behaviors of kids and the adults coaching them and parenting them. So why should we talk about college athletics? Well, perhaps simply because college athletics matters. It is simultaneously a reflection of American idealism and shaped by notions of American essentialism. It exposes what we value as a society and as educators, and can push us to examine the ways in which we care about young people. It is good at its core, but sometimes feels not so good. It is beautiful when it is beautiful, and ugly when it is scandalous. But when done right, college athletics augments an institution and its surrounding community. It can serve as a bridge connecting people who otherwise think they have nothing in common with one another. It can bring visibility to institutions and can advance educational opportunity to a host of young people. Now, you all know we live in an era of sound bites and tweets in which opinion is given equal weight as fact, and within which fact is often accused as fake. College athletics lives in this tenuous and tumultuous space, too. My hope is that this evening we will begin to deconstruct, to separate fact from fiction, and to move beyond the opinion toward the informed. This evening we have 4 illustrious guests joining me on stage. Each, in his or her own right, has shaped national conversations and policies pertaining to college athletics. Now, with input from scholars, journalists, and students, I have written several questions which I will invite our guests to answer. The questions are wide-ranging and intended to help uncover the nuances behind many of today's headlines. The questions also go beyond those headlines, hopefully allowing us to delve into the essence of why college athletics matters and what we can all do to ensure its integrity, placing the welfare of young people at the forefront. At the end of our onstage conversation, I'm going to open up the floor and invite you, the audience, to ask questions of these panelists. So now let me go through and actually formally introduce these amazing panelists. We'll start with President Susan Herbst. In 2010, Susan Herbst was appointed the 15th president of the University of Connecticut. Prior to her appointment at UConn, she served as dean of the College of Liberal Arts at Temple University, provost and executive vice president at the University of Albany, and executive vice chancellor and chief academic officer for the University System of Georgia, where she oversaw the academic missions of 35 public colleges and universities. Her major initiatives at UConn have transformed the university, leading to hundreds of additional faculty members, an increase in enrollment, the construction of major new academic and residential facilities, and a focus on research and innovation. Under her leadership, UConn now ranks 18th in the nation among all public universities and is considered one of the top research universities in the world. She is nationally recognized scholar of public opinion, media, and American politics, and has authored 4 books in this field. She received her BA in political science from Duke University, and her PhD in communication theory and research from the University of Southern California's Annenberg School for Communication. Now, finally, for those of you who pay attention to such things, you know that UConn, the Huskies of UConn, also have the most successful women's basketball program in the nation, having won, I think, 11 national championships, including 4 in a row. And the men's team has done all right, too. They're considered one of the most successful men's college basketball teams, and as a UCLA Bruin, it pains me to admit to that. President Mark Emmert. Mark Emmert began his NCAA presidency in October of 2010. Before assuming his current role as the NCAA president, he was president at his alma mater, the University of Washington, starting in 2004. And prior to that, he was the chancellor at Louisiana State University. They have a football team, right? He also held positions at the University of Connecticut, Montana State University, and the University of Colorado. He's a Washington native. He earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree in political science from the University of Washington and has both a master's degree and PhD in public administration from Syracuse. He is a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a member of the Higher Education Working Group on Global Issues. He is a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and was previously an American Council on Education Fellow and a J.W. Fulbright Administrative Fellow. He has written extensively on higher education and public administration over a career that spans the last 30 years. President Emmert is committed to enhancing the student-athlete experience for the nearly 500,000 student-athletes across the nation and is a steadfast believer in the collegiate model, student-athlete academics, student-athlete well-being, and integrity by all involved. Executive Director Robin Harris. Robin Harris is Executive Director of the Ivy League Conference, of which, of course, Harvard is a member. In this role, she has overseen the implementation of the inaugural Ivy League men's and women's basketball tournaments. She's a graduate of the Duke University School of Law, where she served as an editor of the Duke Law Journal, and she also received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Duke. She is a seasoned conference commissioner who has guided the Ivy League in the creation and development of the Ivy League Digital Network, which has broadcast over 1,000 live events in each of its 3 years. These efforts and others have enhanced the exposure of the Ivy League nationally. Moreover, Director Harris has developed a continuing, broad-based concussion research and prevention initiative. This has led to the league's review and implementation of a variety of concussion curbing measures across a number of sports, including a comprehensive league-wide data collection and study of concussion in all sports. And because of her efforts, the Ivy League is at the forefront on concussion research and protocols and serves as an exemplary model for other institutions around the nation. And of course, last but not least, President Chris Howard. Chris Howard is the 8th president of Robert Morris University, a nationally ranked research university near Pittsburgh. He is a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. He earned a doctorate in politics as a Rhodes Scholar from the University of Oxford. He also earned an MBA with distinction from the Harvard Business School. President Howard, now a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, served our nation as a helicopter pilot, then as an intelligence officer where he was assigned to the elite Joint Special Operations Command. He served in Afghanistan in the Air Force Reserve and was awarded the Bronze Star. He also served as the Reserve Air Attaché to Liberia. Before being named president at Robert Morris University, he was president of Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia and vice president for leadership and strategic initiatives at the University of Oklahoma. President Howard won the Campbell Trophy, the nation's highest academic award for a senior college football player. He is a member of the Verizon Academic All-American Hall of Fame and a winner of the NCAA Silver Anniversary Award. Finally, he is a member of the National Football Foundation Awards Committee, the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics, and the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. I think you can agree with me that we are just wowed by how impressive this group of panelists is, so please join me with a round of applause in welcoming them. So I promised all of them that I would launch with a question that would allow us to really just get into kind of what we all think about athletics, and it's a two-part panel. So if you could briefly tell us why each of you cares about college athletics, and do you believe college athletics makes a positive contribution to American society overall? So Susan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, the reason it's always important to me, or important to the university, is that it's fun, it's exciting, it's healthy. But I think there are three ways that college athletics draws people to a university. So it's, first of all, a university, at least I've only worked in big decentralized research universities, and it draws all the parts of the university together. I can't think of anything else that draws us together. We're as spread out and as diverse as a place like Harvard. So I guess that there's some campus restaurants that everybody goes to, but other than that, people are off going their different directions, and athletics really does pull a big decentralized research university together in a way that nothing else does. Second is the community, the local community. I mean, for women's basketball, we have people driving 6-7 hours to it, but that's exceptional. I'm talking about the more local community, people within 10, 20 miles. For example, soccer, not a big money sport, men's soccer. We average about 3,000 people in the community, and it's families and kids, and they all come out to see UConn soccer. There is nothing like that. It is an amazing feeling. Again, putting aside the football and the basketball. Third, it draws the world toward your university and markets it in a way that you never could. I mean, to have our great women's basketball team out there, they're wonderful students, they're terrific leaders. I could send them anywhere as my personal ambassador. That draws the eyes of the world toward the university and all it brings. All the college presidents say that athletics is the front porch of the university, at least when they have big programs, and that's true, and it is our job, once everybody's on the porch, to pull them into the house, which is a major comprehensive research university. That's what we really do. But it's great to have the sports, get everybody looking at you, so then you can pull them in and show them you have a great school of education, school of engineering, so forth.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, my take on it is a little bit different, of course, because I'm not a university president anymore. But while I was a president and an administrator and a faculty member, much like Susan was just saying, you get to see the power of sports programs on the students who play them in particular. So you get to see this huge leverage, if you will, but it can go in both directions, right? So the programs that are successful, and the vast majority of the student athletes are having these great experiences, but in some cases, there's some underside to it. So you've got to understand that the impact of sport on the students themselves as well as the broader communities is very, very powerful, and that's what attracted me to this job, because you could have an impact not just on the students on your campus, but as you were saying in your introduction, nearly 500,000 NCAA student athletes right now, and even beyond that. So we, in my first year on the job, for example, increased the initial eligibility requirements, academic requirements for Division I athletes. Well, that was an important change the curricular requirements in high school and the grade point average a bit in high school. But what it immediately did was it drove change in high school curricula across the country. This huge leveraging impact on academics by saying, yeah, we want to make sure that student athletes are well prepared. Then every school started reacting to saying, yeah, we want to make sure all our kids can play NCAA sports. So it has this wonderfully large and positive impact when done right. And conversely, it can have some of the negative byproducts too that I'm sure we'll get around to talking about. But what I see is not the 3% of the student athletes that are on TV, because that's about what it is. It's also that whole 97%, the soccer team that's not going to be there, the D2 to D3 programs that aren't going to be there. The vast majority of student athletes are never seen on a television screen, but they're seen doing all the things that we know are very positive for their experiences.
Robin, what's your take?
So I agree with Susan and Mark, and I'll put a little different spin on it sitting in the conference office, that looking at it from a broad perspective, college athletics brings so much to the higher education experience, and it benefits the student athletes themselves in what they learn in managing their time, bouncing back from defeat and adversity, teamwork, communication, the business skills, leadership skills that they're going to need in whatever careers they pursue, because the vast majority are not going to be professional in sports. They're going pro in something other than sports. It also brings so much to the campus community, as Susan mentioned, and the way our campuses can gather around a successful team. I also see it at the conference level. The way our conference can get behind a team that's doing well, and particularly in the Ivy League, where we think we believe in our model that's philosophically based, where our decisions are based on what's right for the student athlete, and we love the exposure that successful teams can bring, but our decisions are going to be philosophically based and not based on where, we're not going to play football on Tuesday nights because we can get a good football package. And so to see the exposure and the positive publicity that we can receive through sports is truly phenomenal.
Chris?
Well, first off, I want to say that anybody that likes the UConn women's basketball team hasn't had to play against them. So my first year as president, the good news is we won the Northeast Conference. The bad news is that we played UConn, and I think the Celtics probably would have lost the UConn women that night. So I just want to go on record as saying that. So I come to this as a former student athlete, a D1 athlete, with a brother who played football at Baylor, a niece that plays volleyball at Furman, a son that runs track at Middlebury, and a son that played football at Swanee. So I not only drank the Kool-Aid, I took the Kool-Aid IV when it comes to athletics. And it's very difficult for me, as an Air Force Academy graduate, to quote a West Pointer, but I will say, on the fields of friendly strife, for some of the seas and other days and other fields will bear the fruits of victory. General Douglas MacArthur, serving as superintendent of the United States Military Academy, said to the Corps cadets, what you learn on the playing fields will help you when you go to combat, when you serve your nation. As Robin alluded to, discipline, teamwork, attention to detail, dealing with deprivation, dealing with pain and suffering as a team and coming together to overcome obstacles. I learned a heck of a lot about that in my moral philosophy class when I studied Immanuel Kant, but I learned maybe even more about it with Coach Fisher DeBerry on the gridirons playing against various teams, Notre Dame, BYU, Ohio State, who, by the way, we beat. So the lens for me is, and I like the term that my colleagues have been using, when it's done right, you're a better person because of. When you're done wrong, bad things happen for you and for the institution. I will close out by saying that when I was at Hampton-Sydney and then even at Robert Morris, I speak to virtually every team every season. I recite the quote. The seniors, they're seniors because they say it with me. The freshmen are like, what is this guy talking about? But I keep imploring upon them, are you doing it the right way? Because if you do it the right way, you'll be a better man, a better woman, a better mother, a better father, a better sister, a better brother, a better business leader, a better manager, if you do it right. So let's work together to do it right. So that's the lens I come to it at. Jim.
Great, thanks. Chris, why don't we stick with you? Here's another question for the four of you. What keeps you up at night when you think about athletics?
Well, my mom had a saying, said the higher you get up a flagpost, the more your butt they can see. So, the more successful your program is, the more people are looking at you. When I was at Hampton-Sydney D3 program, the visibility of that versus our basketball program at Robert Morris, which has gone to 8 NCAA division playoff games, played in 4 NITs, beat Kentucky a few years ago, the lens is really on you. And at the end of the day, they are 18, 19, 21, 22, right? And we know what 18 through 22-year-olds do, even if we don't want to admit it. They just happen to have social media, hypermedia, friends with cameras near them. And so my thing is that they're going to have a lapse in memory, a lapse in judgment, and that lapse in judgment will be played again and again and again and again. That's what keeps me up at night. Plus, and probably more importantly, the impact on them, because when they make that mistake, they hurt their team, they hurt their school, they hurt their family. That hurts them a lot as well. So that's what kind of keeps me up at night.
How about you, Robin?
So I'm fortunate because representing Ivy League institutions and the way we handle things, we do it right.
Nothing keeps you up at night?
No, things keep me up at night. I let our athletic directors worry about the students' behavior because I know they're handling it the right way when it goes wrong. What keeps me up at night from a broader perspective is where Division I is headed. And how are we going to stay together as a division? And are we right-sized for the division? There's quite a divide where we have the Power 5 conferences. They have a ton of money. Some of them sponsor a lot of sports, some don't. In the Ivy League, we average 35 sports. Harvard has 42 since we're on campus here. There are schools, I'll take the Big Ten and the SEC, where they average very different number of sports with similar budgets. And so they're putting a lot of money into a couple of sports. They don't come anywhere close to our sponsorship, but when you start to put the amount of money that we're talking about into a couple of sports, there's a keeping up with the Joneses that then happens. And I'm worried about the future of broad-based sports sponsorship. In particular, men's programs, because Title IX does protect the women's programs more. So I really worry about the men's programs that are more likely to be cut as the race to keep up with the Joneses keeps going. And can the division stay together in a way that makes sense? It's a very large division. We're 350 plus schools. Mark probably knows the number exactly.
351.
That was close. I got the plus. And we're very different. And where the Ivy League fits is very different because we're successful athletically. We're the sixth best conference if you look across all sports. But I worry about some of the schools that maybe don't have the budget to compete at the Division I level. And I worry about the future of the broad-based sports sponsorship.
So, Mark, it's funny asking you this question because I don't know if you've gotten any sleep this last week. But what keeps you up at night?
Well, I hadn't thought about Robin's point for at least a couple of weeks, so now I won't sleep because of that. I think she's right. There are these huge gaps. But, I'd actually make it a little more personal about students, especially students who are coming to, and this is sort of tied to the past few weeks, but students who are provided this amazing opportunity to come to any one of our universities or colleges, but they're, for a variety of reasons, they're either not able or not allowed to or aren't incented to take advantage of that. And in particular, I worry about students who see being a college athlete as an end in and of itself. And in particular, they think they want to be a professional athlete. And this is the biggest problem in football and basketball, men's basketball in particular, where they honestly believe that they're going to go out and make a living, a very, very lucrative living as a professional basketball player, let's say. We survey our student athletes, all of them, across all three divisions every couple of years. And we know that around 3/4, this is a staggering number, around 75% of Division I men's basketball players, there's about 5,200 of them, about 75% of those, when asked the question, say, I am going to make a living as a professional basketball player. Well, about 2% will make a living as a professional basketball player, but yet 75% think they are. Are they banking on and making decisions about what I'm going to do in school, where this is taking me, with such unrealistic expectations? Because, again, this very positive leverage of sport and its attractiveness has some negative sides to it. So they're not necessarily taking full advantage of what's in front of them. They're not getting straight answers on what the realistic probability is of being a professional athlete. They don't realize that what's going to change their life is getting a college degree from one of these great schools. And we see the outcomes of that when it doesn't work right, and it's not good. It's not good at all. So that's the personal side of it that troubles me a lot.
Susan, what do you think?
Well, you listed all the things. But there is one other related, personal item, which is, and the thing that worries me the most is injuries. And I'm not just talking about concussions, all the injuries I see our athletes get all the time. It pains me when I watch one of our football players go down. I mean, I'm a mom and all that, but I think it's true for so many people, whether they have children or not, to see these kids who are 18 to 22-year-old, getting hurt. And, we've had some, chilling moments, as a lot of you have seen when you watch college sports. I remember once a few years ago, one of our best women's basketball players got really badly hurt on the floor, 15,000 people there. You could hear a pin drop, and she was just moaning and crying, and, I mean, that's the worst. So I worry about that all the time. I know the players. I know how they feel. I know how hard they work. And it's not just about, season-ending injuries. It's that a lot of them are in pain. Sometimes they don't tell you. But I have to say that a few years ago when we won the men's NCAA tournament, basketball tournament, we were playing, not speaking out of school. The weights, the measurements show it all. But our guys were little. We're a guard-heavy program, as you know. And we're playing Kentucky in the final, as I'm sure you remember. And our guys walk out there, and Kentucky walks out there, and I just think, oh my God, please don't let anybody get hurt. I mean, really hurt. That's because the size differential was so great. We won anyway. But that's the thing that keeps me up at night, and it's visceral.
In my opening comments, I alluded to this variation that is present throughout the landscape of college athletics, the Division I, the Division II, Division III. Some of them are highly visible. Actually, a minority of them are highly visible, and the rest just simply aren't. When you think about the variation that exists in institutional types and scale, scope, and visibility for college athletics, what impact do you think that has on public perception about sport, college sport? Is that on the mark? Is it healthy? Is there a problem in that public perception? Does the public have a sense of the diversity of institutions? Mark, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think no, they don't, and it's natural enough that they wouldn't, because we all know what we see in the popular press or media. What you see on, I said it a minute ago, but what you see on television typically is Saturday afternoon football or Saturday football, during the fall. And then and the average person knows that, and then they know March Madness basketball, right? And if that's what you know from college sports, you're seeing about 3% of all the student athletes participating. So you're missing 97%. You're missing the vast majority of what goes on. So people don't see that. And then even among those schools, the ones that are consistently on television, consistently in the news, are written about are the most elite programs, which also tend to be, as Robin was saying, those that have the largest revenue packages. And so you wind up with some really distorted views. I've had more people say to me, the only reason any college has sports is because they make so much money at it. I mean, I've lost the number of times that I've heard that. Well, I know what UConn makes off of it, and I know how much they put into it.
We're never in it for the money.
And they're not in it for money. There were last year about 22, out of 1,100, there were about 22 schools in America that had positive cash flow, i.e. made money, out of their athletic program. Virtually no school plays sport to make money at it. That's not, they do it for all the reasons that Susan was saying. But you would gather from, that small slice that you see on TV, the Michigans or the USCs or the, Kentuckys or this is all about, big programs, big money, big this, big that. You don't see those schools cross-country team. You just see their basketball team or maybe their football team. So that's not a criticism. It's just I think a natural fact that because of the popularity of a small component of it, hyper popular, you miss the body of the enterprise.
Yeah, Robin, you have a perspective on that as a conference commissioner?
I completely agree. I think that the public generally sees who is on TV the most, and they see the pageantry and the commercialism, frankly, that's attendant to particularly the March Madness college football bowl season, but also just the Saturday afternoons, the 100,000 people, and the commercial nature of the activity, where you see all the signage and the sponsored by, and that's what they see, and they think all this money is being generated, and frankly it is. And the networks pay those conferences a lot of money. So we in the Ivy League, we have a Friday night football package on NBC Sports Network, and we're lucky if we get our production costs paid for. So people think we're generating money off that package. No, we're trying to gain exposure, and I have colleagues paying $1 million to get their games in their conferences on networks, whether it's football or basketball. In the Ivy League, I have great presidents who have said we cannot pay for football production. That's great leveraging with the network. So when you see us on, we're not paying out of operating dollars. We may get sponsorships to help us put our games on. And I just think there's a general misperception out there about the number of programs that are not making any money at all. They're hoping to subsidize some of the money they're investing in providing these sports programs that benefit the student athletes, benefit the campus community, and then the community at large. And we're just talking Division I, I don't think they understand. Let alone, the vast majority do not understand that there are Divisions 2 and 3. And they get lost in the conversation completely.
And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the Division II, probably Division III, a lot of schools see athletics as one of the vehicles for actually generating enrollment on their campuses.
Oh,
Is this not true?
Yeah, for sure in Division III. Well, Chris
Yeah,
knows.
it's huge. When I at Hampton-Sydney College, it's a school of 1,100. It was an all-male liberal arts college, and I see my colleague, the former president of Morehouse College, in the front. So shout out to the men's colleges, and to Hobart, William Smith, Mark Gerson, shout out to the men's colleges. 10% of the football team, 10% of my student body was in the football team.
Yeah.
And they weren't on scholarship. So it's a different mindset in terms of attracting people to campus because you don't give out scholarships. So it's not an inexpensive enterprise, even at the D3 level, but it's a different model. But I wanted to just kind of pivot on the question before in terms of the public perception. Somebody got to this point, the Power Fives and the rest of the universe down here. The thing about the public perception of it is that schools want to be them. You can't help yourself when you're a smaller. We got 16 Division I sports at Robert Morris University, and they cut a few sports before I got there. To the point somebody mentioned before, because we were joking. We said we had half the budget of Pitt in 5 more teams. So do the math on that. So we got smaller, but there's this insatiable desire to want to be a little bit more like your colleague right there. And I'm on the night commission, and I always look at Arnie Duncan at the night commission meetings, and I smile and I say, his job is to make sure that I don't go bankrupt by keeping some downward pressure on the cost of the sport. Because the other part of it, and I'll stop here, is that student athletes also want to be there. Don't kid yourself. You don't think that first off, they're all playing together in the same sports when they come out of high school or select sports. And the margin of difference between a D1 athlete and a D3 athlete, depending on the sport, is very, very close, by the way. And so they want to be in the big game. They want to be the hero. They want to be the rock star, the superstar. So just a lot of pressure that we all have to exert as the adults in the room to keep that down and keep that at bay.
So Susan, you're at a major public university, and of course, like all public universities, you have a negotiation with the state legislature about budget, and budgets are up, budgets are usually down. How is the perception around athletics? How does that play out sort of in a state environment? Do you find that legislators have a realistic idea about the impact of athletics? Do they perceive you having money hand over fist? Or do they have a realistic understanding, just the public in general?
Yeah, it's mixed. I mean, some of them understand what athletics and UConn brings to the state and their fans. And a lot of people in the legislature went to UConn and all that, but a lot of them don't understand it at all and think that we are generating money hand over foot. And that all the donors to the university they give to athletics, which is far from the case. So I'd say it's all over the map. One of the things that happened, Mark, you were at UConn, or maybe you had just left, but our momentum, our fame in women's basketball really actually pushed the legislature to invest in the university on the academic side. So you were
I was
there.
there.
Right
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a nice case where it's doing exactly what you hope it will. But I'd say it's mixed. Not everybody understands it, and it's a lot of moving parts to understand. So
I want to turn our conversation to scandals.
That's all mine.
So as we all know, forum is done.
Let's do it over.
Just a minute, let me get a drink of water.
You might need something stiffer. So as we all know, college athletics is always in the news because of one scandal or another. I mean, it's in the news for a lot of things, but the scandals, they take a lot of attention. And the most recent reports, especially in the last week regarding college basketball, is a reminder of this. And of course, the recent news at the University of North Carolina. And so I'm going to ask you all about your thoughts generally about college athletics scandals, and what does this say about the overall state of college athletics? Mark, when you get to your answer, I'd love for you to just simply ask the question that's probably on everybody's mind. Does the NCAA have any teeth?
So do you want me to start on this?
Why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, I don't want to answer that one answer that part last. So first of all, 30 seconds on what is the NCAA, because most people don't understand that. So the NCAA is, and it actually emanated 115 years ago from this campus as much as any place in history, is simply an association of 1,100 universities who come together, and colleges, who come together to make all the rules to create the environment within which college sport exists. It is not some monolithic entity. People tend to think of it as sort of like the NBA or something like that. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's a self-regulatory framework for the universities and colleges, and it's a way all higher education in America operates. The universities and colleges of America do their own self-regulation around accreditation. They pass judgment on each other to determine whether or not the law school is good enough, whatever the model is. That's how we do it in American higher education, because we don't have federal ministries of education or federal ministries of sport, and we tend to, as a nation, believe that's the right way to go, and I happen to agree with that. So the NCAA, so the group of universities came together 115 years ago, led in part by the football coach here, and with Teddy Roosevelt, they create the NCAA. When you look at the NCAA's ability to oversee sport, you're really asking, can universities and colleges themselves oversee sport? I think it's the right way to think about it. We've had, if you look at the basketball scandals that have been unearthed by the FBI and the Southern District of New York's Attorney's Office, what you see is a group of relationships that I think have evolved, or maybe more accurately devolved over a period of time, to create an environment that's incredibly unhealthy and a system that clearly is not working in many of its dynamics. So the summer recruitment model for youth basketball has become really dysfunctional in many ways. We could talk about that all night. It appears, if you believe all of the accusations, that the relationship with apparel company anyway, has become highly dysfunctional. I find it impossible to believe that the only way people can sell tennis shoes is by bribing youngsters, but that seems to be where something has digressed now. We saw, most despicably to me, coaches who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year taking $10,000, $20,000 bribes to take advantage of the trusting relationship that a young person has in them to send them toward an agent or a financial advisor who unequivocally doesn't have their best interest at heart. I mean, when you see that, you just think, what in the world is going on in that set of relationships there? And then ultimately, I think, Jim, it begs your last question, which is, does the NCAA, which again is to say the universities and colleges of America, have a structure right now where they can hold each other accountable for behavior that's essential to having collegiate athletics be successful? And I'm confident the answer to that is yes. But I'm also confident that we've got to make some very fundamental changes in some of those dynamics I was just describing. If there is a very thin silver lining in that whole set of cases, is I have never heard coaches, athletic directors, university, college presidents more adamant about this than they are right now. And I'm hopeful that there will be not just, and we put together a commission, as probably many of you know, people with some folks mostly outside of college sport who are there because they're very high integrity people. They're not content experts. We're going to have to give them a lot of content by bringing in student athletes themselves and people that have been involved in this so that they can come up with strong recommendations. But I'm adamant that we have to have the political will to make a number of changes in each of those dimensions that will restore people's confidence in what that sport in particular is all about. Now, the fact that that's occurring in one portion of one sport at a very small level is utterly unacceptable, but that doesn't mean the whole system needs to be thrown away. It means we've got to be really aggressively serious about fixing that component of it and do it with sincerity, and I have great confidence that can get done. It's not going to be easy, but I'm confident that the university leaders in the country are, because I know so many of them as friends and colleagues, they're willing to say, enough, stop that.
Can I add to that?
Of course,
because
Robin, go ahead.
I have, in a prior life, before coming to the Ivy League, I worked in the infractions part of the NCAA and actually wrote a law review article when I was a student on the NCAA enforcement process. And so I do think that it is a self-policing organization, as a membership association should be. And while the allegations are incredibly troubling and, if true, terrible, and they need to be addressed, and with Mark's leadership, I do think they will be addressed, it's cyclical. It's happened before. If the Pony Express, for those that may remember back even before my time,
SMU,
it went to the governor's office with cash payments to athletes, football players, and that was, oh my gosh, the end of college football. Well, the NCAA policed that. SMU got the only death penalty. You may know about the death penalty. It means you can't compete for a certain number of years, and it's taken SMU decades to recover. And some say they really haven't fully recovered. And these things are cyclical. It used to be cars. I staffed a committee when I was on the NCAA staff about 20 years ago looking at this very issue that is the subject of the FBI inquiry, and worked with athletic directors to try and get to the bottom of it, talk to shoe company executives. No one was talking. So to Mark's point, the fact that this is now a federal matter, hopefully information will come to light.
There'll be a catharsis. There'll be a catharsis, yeah.
Transparency could bring healing.
And back to these money sports being a small percentage of what goes on in college sport. I mean, let's keep perspective on it too. And it pains me that people will think there's rampant corruption in college sports, given, I don't know, our great field hockey. Another thing we got to talk about women's sports because it's really important.
Not in the scandal part, though.
No, not at all. And so I don't know. It's like all the sports you play and all they bring to your campus, and this particular sport and these particular bad eggs are involved, and not that it's nothing. It doesn't need to get looked at systematically, but we also got to
put it in perspective. I think is important. I'll sort of kind of cut it across different cleavages in sort of civil society. So somebody mentioned, you mentioned the Pony Express, or you saw the 30 for 30, the Pony Excess. Some of all of a certain age will remember tailhook. United States Navy, I think it was circa 1987, 1988, where some of the most highly trained and professional United States aviators misbehaved abhorrently at an event, I think it was in Las Vegas. So we were taught in the military that we are a microcosm of society. I think sports are no different, for better or for worse, for good and for bad. This does not forgive what's been done. And I hope the FBI comes there and cleans house and fires a lot of people. I'll be honest with you. I hope a lot of people get in trouble over this. But by the same token, to take this sort of holier thou to think that any part of our civil society, whether it be the military, would it be the FBI? Would it be the Secret Service? Have you seen the things about the Secret Service these last couple of years? I work with the Secret Service. Those are great men and women most of the time. But there's a subset. And back to my flagpole thing that Mama told me, right? Remember that. So I think what my fellow panelists are saying, that put it in perspective. But I think we need to bring the hammer. And, Mark, ours is an association of members. The FBI is the law. And so they have certain things that they can do that you and Don Remy can't do and the infractions committee can't do.
Susan, I want to pick up your prompt about women's sports, and I actually want to maybe broaden the question a little bit and talk about gender equity, which of course has been for many years a priority for those of us who care about college athletics across all institutions. But the question is very simply, have we made enough progress? What work is left to do?
I mean, we've made a huge amount of progress. Nobody can argue that. So Title IX has been wildly successful in bringing women into sports and us colleges and universities supporting sports. One of the places that one of the areas we need to work on, and Mark probably understands this across all colleges and universities, is women head coaches. Mm-hmm. That's been flat. Someone told me recently they think it's down.
It's gone down.
Declining.
It's gone down.
It is.
That's really
It's moving
worrisome.
backward.
Athletic directors at big programs.
Up
women,
ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly. I mean, and Power 5, I can count them on one hand, I think.
Women commissioners.
Women commissioners.
We're making good progress.
Yeah, actually you are.
30%.
Actually, I know
30%.
they're doing well.
Yeah,
The
so
commissioners.
I think that at the leadership level, and can I just say, we can talk about this later with the audience, back to women's sports more generally, why aren't they more interesting to America? I mean, is it just, I mean, this is something I ponder all the time. I mean, women's basketball is a great example. It is a different kind of game. And yeah, we're great at it, and people think we got a lot of attention. I mean, relative to the Auburn, Alabama game. I mean, what is it just that because women don't have certain kinds of strength and speed that we are inherently less interesting playing sports, or is it general misogyny that find throughout American culture? Is it just a reflection of that? Why shouldn't college sports? Yes. So maybe you can help me puzzle that out, because it bothers me.
Let's go there, panel.
Well, it's actually interesting because I agree. It's a fascinating question. I hear from ESPN at meetings that softball and volleyball are growing. They love it. Their ratings are up, and they're trending up. Women's basketball, we have not figured out, and I don't know if it's the direct comparison to the men's game. I don't know, because I love women's basketball.
No dunking.
Very little, yes, no dunking, the skill level. But on the other hand, the women's athletes are generally better shooters in women's basketball, and we don't have these issues, knock on wood, that we're seeing in the men's game. So why can't we promote women's basketball in a very positive way? I don't have the answer why it's not as popular.
What does ESPN say is going on with the volleyball and the softball? Or is it time of year? Or what's up with what is
it? Could be the time of year, but even softball as compared to baseball, they really like the ratings in softball. Now, the softball NCAA championship is not head-to-head against the NCAA baseball championship. Women's and men's basketball are head-to-head.
Yeah.
And nothing beats the men's basketball, which is March Madness. Nothing. So that's one of the issues.
But I have a women's hockey team.
Yep.
And I was sitting in the Chancellor of Syracuse's office maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was so funny. He says, Robert Morris, don't you all play women's hockey? I go, heck yeah, we beat y'all's behind too for the conference championship, and also beat Penn State. So that's one of those cool examples when the mighty mid-major can beat the major school. Women's sports are absolutely phenomenal. I think that just getting eyeballs, just to kind of helicopter up a bit, getting eyeballs to watch anything in this peripatetic generation that watches, I watch my kids watch things, I get seasick because they're just flipping through everything. Nobody watches anything that long anyway. So it's not just women's basketball competing with men's basketball, it's competing with Netflix and Amazon Online and what have you. So ESPN is tying themselves in knots anyway over viewership. Not to mention getting people to go to these big revenue sports and going to stadiums, especially on the football side, because there's been a decline in many places when it comes to actually going to the stadium as well. So I just think that there's a lot of conundrums out there to deal with, and keeping attention is very, very difficult. But I want to go on record saying, man, women's sports rock. And you want to come watch some great sports, come to Robert Morris University. Our women's teams are outstanding. Shameless plug. I just want to put that out there.
And the attention on social media, at least the people I follow, when the men's national team unfortunately didn't qualify for the World Cup in soccer this week, the number of people I saw, media and others, saying, let's get behind the women's team because they're really good, and let's support the women's team. And a couple of years ago, the women's team winning the World Cup really captured the attention of our country.
But that's a little heartbreaking too. The men didn't make it, so something. Let's support the women. I get, we'll take it, right?
I encourage the audience to go ahead and do some follow-ups on this. It's definitely an important issue. I want to keep us talking about an equally important issue. Many believe it is hard to have a genuine conversation about college athletics without also talking about race. Many players on football and basketball teams are black. Conversely, most of the players on all the other teams are white. And, of course, most of the coaches and administrators are white. Some have argued that the labor of black athletes disproportionately funds a lot of college athletics, both at the institutional level and, of course, nationally. So the questions: can college athletics help advance our national interests in achieving racial equality, or is it reinforcing racial inequities? And I want all of you to answer this.
May I start?
Please.
Because I'm a college president? No, I'm just kidding.
You are.
I'm just saying. Just saying. So first off, some of the greatest advances we made with race relations in this country were because of sport. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jackie Robinson, the numbers retired across Major League Baseball. The story a few weeks ago about the first African-American to break the color barrier in the SEC, University of Kentucky player, played 2 minutes, got hurt. It was beautiful. If you get a chance to watch that on ESPN, you should go watch it. Sports have been a lot in terms of bringing us together as one nation. So let's never, ever forget that. In terms of the coaching piece, it does pain me. It pains me actually as an administrator. And I'm the president of a university, Robert Morris University, which happens to be predominantly white serving institution. Everybody thinks I run Morris Brown, which is an HBCU. So when I walk into a room as a black president, I'm like a polka dotted unicorn. No one knows what to do with me. So you start thinking about the players that are coming into the game, and you start identifying early on who's going to be your grad assistant, who you're going to coach up, who you're going to sponsor, not just mentor, but sponsor. Because these coaching trees, these roots are deep, right? So the presuppositions that we make as a society about people when they come onto the gridiron and the basketball court, I think it's problematic from the beginning. But to answer your question, yes, we can do something about it. I love what the Knight Commission's doing. So this is like the yin and yang of Chris Howard. The Knight Commission's telling the college football playoff selection, college football playoff, you should take some of that money, and there's a lot of money there, and put it into diversity efforts. And me, the college football playoff selection committee, I'm not in the governor's part. I just grade football teams and choose the winners, so I don't have to do that part. But I think that the Knight Commission and my colleagues there have it right, and it's going to take a deliberate front step, just like with Title IX. Something very, very deliberate to change that, or it's never going to change, because I think the mindset is, I don't know if this person's the person that's going to rise to be a coach, because sometimes we don't see players like that when they come onto the field, and unfortunately I've experienced that. So,
Robin, your thoughts. Thank you.
I think that, to piggyback on what Chris said, that college athletics absolutely provides a platform to bring our diverse society together. First of all, starting with the team. Nothing brings a team together like competition on the field, and then the campus community getting behind a team, whatever color or sexual orientation or whatever of the competitors. And I think so from the competition standpoint, it's a positive. And even the dialogues we've had over the anthem and the flag, I think is healthy. It's healthy discussion in an educational setting. We need to have this. It's bringing an issue that is fundamental to light and allowing us to talk about it if we do so in a meaningful way. What troubles me the most is we're not making great progress in terms of hiring at the coaching level and at the administrative level. So I think there's a lot of work that remains to be done there. And even tomorrow, I'm actually going to a conference in New York that the Women's Sports Foundation is conducting, and it's about hiring coaches and administrators and in promoting diversity for gender, but also diversity overall, because it's something that we haven't figured out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, these are themes that I've been, talking a lot publicly about for a long time, because I think I think the premise of your question is right, that you can't talk about sport in America, collegiate sport in particular, without thinking and talking about race and opportunity. And I think it's, as both speakers just said, I think it's two sides of a coin, right? So there's some part of it that provides extraordinary opportunity, and has for a long time for a lot of minority communities. Financially, $2.7 billion of financial aid now goes out directly to students for athletic scholarships across the country. Disproportionate number in many sports to minority students. Very large number of first-generation students find their way to college via sport, and it serves a very important role in all of that. I think, though, simultaneously, for whatever the dynamic is folks are talking about, those same young men and young women are not seeing themselves as somebody who should become a coach or an administrator, and that transition's not occurring in ways that we would like. We have to do a lot more to get, as I think, as Chris was just saying, to get coaches and administrators and people who work on the campuses to start encouraging young people to think not just about my career as an athlete, but also about my career, and that I'm going to, I like this game, I love this game, I want to stay around this game, and so how can I move into new roles in intercollegiate athletics? You also raised an interesting point where you said, well, the two revenue sports, football, men's basketball, they have a disproportionately large number of African Americans in those two games, and that's what generates the revenue, and isn't everybody else living off of that revenue? And I think that's a very important question to ask. We don't see nearly the same number and level of participation in a lot of sports. They're not nearly as integrated for a couple of reasons. One, I think especially students from lower economic backgrounds are looking at sport as a career choice, as a way to improve their family's circumstances, and that leads you toward those that have the best professional career options, and that's football and basketball. It's hard to see a lot of athletes that are playing field hockey, making it in the bigs. We see basketball, we see football, and so a lot of minority young men are drawn to those games. That makes a lot of sense. But I think the other piece is there's a lot of sports that are just not open and aren't reaching out in appropriate ways to a more diverse audience. I don't think, I was at the University of Washington, won 5 men's, not NCAA, 5 men's rowing championships, a couple women's rowing championships. I don't think I've ever seen an African-American rower, ever. Yes, there are some. I'm just saying my experience. In all those championships. Well, why? What's that all about? And so we're not providing as many diverse opportunities, or as many opportunities for diverse athletes in some fields, and we need to get way, way better at that.
And of course, some might say even the economics of youth sport now have skewed in the direction of benefiting those parents and families who have resources
no question
to send
about
their children to
no
elite
question
camps, and coaches are beginning to recruit from those kinds of high-resourced environments, so that's
no
a problem
question.
as well.
Yeah.
Susan, do you have a perspective on this?
No, I think people covered it really well. I will say that when the athletics department is running well on a campus, the athletes are supporting each other cross sports. So I will see the predominantly male, the men's basketball team coming to women's volleyball meet, which is a mostly white team. And I think faculty, staff, students across the university would do well to look at their athletics department for some lessons about climate. So I was talking to 2 African-American football players the other day, and I was talking about race on campus and starting so-called difficult dialogues among our students, and they looked at me like I had 2 heads. Because on their football team, it's like they're living it and they're loving it, and they like that everybody else out there is having trouble talking about race. I mean, it was great to see their surprise in this. So I said to them, help me out.
That's a great point.
So the NCAA and certainly all of its member institutions uniformly believe student athletes are amateurs rather than employees. In what ways do you believe we can make progress, given this uniform belief, toward nonetheless addressing athletes' concerns while still maintaining this idea of amateurism? Mark, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is, probably the most talked about subject out there in intercollegiate athletics today, and coming out of the FBI investigations around basketball, I saw yet again a whole nother spate of opinions that saying, well, look, we just need to pay the players, and then that erases all of these problems. I think that's incredibly naive to think that. But the more important question is, what are college sports about, and why do schools support and participate in these activities? I mean, we were just talking earlier about the fact that virtually no universities or colleges make money playing sports, despite what people think. So why are they doing this? Why would you spend a lot of money to support an activity at a college or a university? And it's not simply because people want to have the very best basketball team, and people are so excited to see the very best basketball team, and I know that that's true, because has anybody ever been, show of hands, anybody ever been to an NBA development league, a D-League basketball game? A handful of you? Okay, how many of the rest of you don't even know what I'm talking about? The worst D-League basketball team that are in cities that you've never heard of would destroy on the basketball court the best college basketball team. Wouldn't even be close. They'd be so much better at basketball. But they play in front of almost nobody. Well, why is that? It's not because people want to see better basketball games. They want to go watch college games. They want to go watch college students play basketball. If anybody thought North Carolina, when they won last year, was the best basketball team in America, they're not paying attention, because they're the best college basketball team, but not even remotely close to the best basketball team. People associate students with their universities. We have students being engaged in their campus, part of the campus life, representing their school. Now imagine if they were simply employees. Now let's think about this model for a minute. We're not going to recruit students to our campus. We're going to go hire a basketball team, right? Well, that's the model, right? People say, no, they don't have to be employees. Just give them $100,000. But I read that just a couple days ago. Well, I don't know how you give somebody $100,000 and have them not be an employee. That's twice the national household income, right? So okay, now we've got this person as an employee. We're going to hire them for $100,000. I don't know why Susan would go hire an 18-year-old. Why would you hire an 18-year-old for $100,000 to play basketball for you? The D-League pays $25,000. Okay, now if I'm going to hire somebody, I'm going to hire the best basketball player I can hire. Why in God's earth would I want him to take calculus or any class? If they're my basketball employee, there's nobody else in the university that we require to take classes. Why my basketball player? And then, oh, by the way, when they're 26 or 28, and I decide, well, that's too old now, I'm going to send them away. I can't fire this person. That's called age discrimination. They're an employee. They're not a student. This has nothing to do with a university when you say you're going to make them an employee. They're going to be our students, and they're going to play in that context. Now, the second half of your question is, I'm sorry, I'm getting long-winded here. The second half of your question is, I think we also then have an obligation to provide them everything that they can possibly use and take advantage of to be a successful student. Anything that's tethered to their education. And so we've been able to make a number of really important changes over the past handful of years, so the student athletes have, in fully funded Division I programs now, have as much as we can think of to provide them that's tethered to their educational experience. A UConn basketball player, man or woman, is getting a really good, strong set of support systems and financial resources and medical and health resources that allow them to be successful as an athlete and as a student. And they provide this incredibly fulsome experience. Students got to step through and take advantage of it, but to take that away and say, now we're just going to go hire the best basketball players, makes utterly no sense in a university context.
And we're making a step in the right direction. If you go back to the Fab Five freshman University of Michigan, we saw that 30 for 30 on ESPN. It's a great line where Chris Webber or Juwan Howard says, I saw everybody wearing my jersey, and I had to borrow gas money. So, sometimes we don't give the NCAA pats in the back, but full cost of attendance, which you're alluding to, you still be an amateur, but have an opportunity to be financially okay on campus.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think about all this in terms of amateurism, we were talking about this sort of back there, people coming into sport come from very, very diverse backgrounds. And, as a coach or as an administrator or whatever, anybody coming to your campus, you got to meet them where they are and take them where they need to go. But the lumpiness and the unevenness in what people have coming in, it's a little bit like unpaid internships. That's what rich people do. Because poor people need to eat, right? Well, most people need to eat, but poor people need to get food and they need to get money to eat. So for us not to acknowledge that, I'll be honest with you, Mark, I don't think we're done with the full cost of attendance yet. And it scares me because I'm not a Power 5. I used to work at the University of Oklahoma, which was a big, big Power 5. And they could do some things in their program to kind of equalize and do some things. But it's the scrappy other 200 of us looking up at the top that it kind of concerns me. But I would just say that we're probably a little bit more we have to do financially. We can still not abrogate the amateur model, though. But I think there's might be a little bit more we have to do. Because I look at what kids have coming on my campus, coming from higher socioeconomic, lower socioeconomic strata. And when you see it on the same team, it just seems to be a little problematic and people start kind of looking around looking for other things. So I think that book is not yet quite written, but yeah, no way do I take away from the amateur status part of it.
You and I have talked about it, and I agree completely with you.
It's interesting because I think when college athletics is done right, the issue doesn't even come up, whether they're amateurs or employees. Because if you're treating them as students who are in a co-curricular endeavor that happens to involve athletic competition, and they are provided wonderful resources to have that opportunity, but that they can balance being a student and an athlete. And it's hard. It's not easy. We were talking about it with the Harvard Student Athlete Advisory Committee today. It's really hard. But when they get through and they have a degree from any of our institutions, they're going to be well situated for whatever comes next. The companies, the government, the nonprofits are going to want to hire these superstars that have balanced the demands of being a competitive athlete with getting their degree. And so when we do that in the right way and we're treating them as students, I don't think the question comes up. When the question comes up, it's such a small percentage. It's that same 3% where the revenue is, the commercialism that comes into play. And I do want to comment on the cost of attendance because, as you may know, the Ivy League does not offer athletic scholarships. However, we have been providing cost of attendance forever because if you qualify for full need, you were getting cost of attendance. So I applaud the NCAA for having the athletic scholarship reflect what students with need were getting already on campuses. And so maybe there is more room to do something along those lines that's consistent with the educational experience.
But it's kind of baffling. I think it's one of the least interesting and important discussions about whether student athletes should get paid. I know so many student athletes, so many universities I've been at. I've never heard this complaint from them. They feel incredibly grateful for their athletic scholarship and all the support that they get from the university, and that they should be paid or they should be employees. I mean, I know politically where it comes from, but typically it doesn't come from student athletes who are there to, have fun, compete, and get supported, because it really is very hard, at least being a D1 athlete, super hard.
My last question, then I want to open up to the audience here, but I want to see if any of you have anything to say about overall wellness of students, and by that I'm talking about concussions and mental health issues. So any one of you want to chime in on that?
Well, we've obviously been a leader on the concussion front for about 7 years now, taking a look at concussions in sports, and we have I think we're in the 4th year of a league-wide study, also partnering with the Big Ten to gather information on every concussion, the mechanism of injury. And that's been a presidentially led initiative. We had 2 Ivy League presidents who were medical doctors who were very concerned about concussions early on, before Mark arrived at the NCAA, when frankly the NCAA wasn't doing much in the area of concussion, and we didn't want to wait. And so that's been one of the most inspirational initiatives that we've undertaken, because I think to the point earlier about how high schools have reacted when the NCAA raised APR standards. I've seen high schools and youth sports react as we took a leadership role in concussion management. And the NCAA is doing so much more now with the biggest study with the Department of Defense and gathering data. And I think that's a really important initiative because we're not going to do away with concussions. Concussions happen in life. You can fall down the steps and have a concussion. It's how we treat them and how we diagnose them and how we can prevent them. And that's what we have to really look at and examine. And then mental health is a huge issue, and our student athletes they're such overachievers, I think, at all our schools.
Well, in fairness, some might say that the mental health issue might be particularly challenging for a student athlete population, given how much pressure and stress they face, practicing for 20 plus hours a week and trying to hold it all together, et cetera. Is there any view that you have
Yeah, but they because they have coaches and assistant coaches, and there's more eyes on them, I think they actually get a fair amount of support. I'm worried about the rest of the student body. I mean, mental health is, huge, without question, the biggest challenge on any college campus. This is, millennials, you are a very anxious, stressed generation.
And depressed.
Yeah, and depressed. And
30% higher, 30%.
Our police take a couple kids a day to get psychological services, and I'm not talking about the psychologist in a building on campus. I'm talking about to the hospital, to the emergency room for really worrisome, suicide threats, stuff like that. So it's gigantic. I think athletes have it not better, but at least they're adults with eyes on them.
And there's some coping part of it as well, because there's a physical outlet. A lot of times the student at large doesn't.
They don't get isolated.
Very much so. They get insulated in that way. Brian Hainline, who works for Mark at the NCAA, is the chief medical officer. Is he a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon?
He's a neuroscientist.
Neurologist. Neurologist, thank you very much. I brought him to Robert Morris to speak to my leadership council and our student athlete advisory council, and also our coaches. And it was interesting because the conversation obviously with the concussions first, but very quickly, Brian said, the biggest issue facing our student athletes is mental health issues, period. Depression, anxiety. 30% of students that show up at school are showing up anxious or depressed, compared to maybe 15% that reported that 10, 15 years ago. So, there really is a problem. Now, my athletic director also happens to be a psychiatrist. And so they were giving each other serious, love nods. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. I am saddened by young folks coming to university today, whether it be student athletes or not student athletes, the ability to cope with. Not quite sure where it comes from. Not quite sure how it originated, but it is a big deal. Suicide, I didn't know what the term suicide ideation was until I became a university or college president. And I hear it way too frequently. It's the same as Susan sort of intimated. One other comment, sort of a personal level, when it comes to concussion protocols. We are so much better at concussions and health in general for our student athletes, even though there are still those terrible injuries that Susan alluded to. We're so much better. I'm of a certain age. When I played high school football and college football, I missed salt tablets, right? But I had water breaks. And what do I mean by that? So I'm 48 years old. I know you can't believe it, but I am. I'm 48. The people that came before me would be given salt tablets at football practice. That's really stupid. You don't have to be at Harvard ed school to know, or medical school to know. You don't give somebody salt when they're really dehydrated. When I was playing high school football in Texas, we would have water breaks. So you exercise and drink water breaks. Now, people drink water all the time at practice. We're supposed to stay hydrated. Concussions are, although tragic and more problematic than this salt tablet thing, we are just getting better and smarter and wiser every day. People like Brian Hainline leading a time where the youth programs are actually doing better. The soccer programs now, you don't head below the age of like 9 or 11 or something like that. So I'm really excited about the work of Department of Veteran Affairs, DOD, and the NCAA and the youth sports associations in terms of getting better and better when it comes to these health protocols.
If I could just add one last word, this is the area that we're making the vast majority of our new investments for pretty obvious reasons. The largest and the best concussion longitudinal study about concussion, the natural history of concussion, which medical science does not understand very well, is being done by us and the Department of Defense. It's now a $40 million study with, I don't know what we're up to now, over 7,000 student athletes participating. And it is, I'm convinced, going to be the way that we really understand this. But you can't wait for 5, 10, 15 years to find out what we really need to know about head trauma. So as soon as we discover or learn or suspect anything, we've been trying to modify and change the rules. So it's a classic praxis model where, you know, you learn a little bit, you apply a little bit, you learn a little bit, you apply a little bit, and then as we get real empirical data on any of these matters, then we can make very substantive changes. The Ivy League, we do salute the Ivy League because they were the earliest to move toward dramatically reduced contact periods. Those are now standard across all of football. I don't know how anybody can learn football these days, Chris, without 2-a-days in the summer and salt tablets. But apparently you can.
Yes.
And so it's I think the most significant thing that's going on right now, and I agree with everything that's been said about mental health.
We have a kickoff rule we like that we're experimenting with again this year that we'd like the NCAA to follow. Kicking off from the 40-yard line, get more kickoffs into the end zone and reduce the collisions, which we were getting 25% of our concussions and 6% of the plays of kickoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you can envision football looking quite a bit different as we start to understand what these issues are. The game's still very popular, but of course we're seeing in some regions, like around here, rapid decline in youth participation in football, and that's all about concern about health.
Okay, well, thank you. We want to open up for a handful of questions here from the audience. I want to gently encourage you to make sure you're actually asking a question. So if I interrupt you to get to the question, it's just in the interest of making sure we get good questions here. We'll start on this side of the room.
Hi. I'm going to take this off because I'm super tall. So hi, President Emmert and the rest of the committee for coming today. It was really great to hear your comments. My name is Rebecca Fikert. I'm a second year at the Harvard Business School, and I'm working on a startup that helps college athletes go on to be successful in life after sports. I'm a former Division I basketball player. I played basketball at the University of Kansas. And I'm telling you this because this relates to my question. When I went through college sports, it was the hardest thing I ever did. We did not practice 20 hours a week. We practiced 40 hours a week, sometimes more. And while that was difficult at the time, I went on to do great things in life after sports, and it's all because of basketball. Basketball is the reason I'm at Harvard right now. However, 7 years after school, when I looked around at my teammates and my other friends who played other sports at Kansas and other universities, there was a huge split between those of us who were just crushing life, which fortunately I'm in that group, kind of, and those of us who are really struggling. So some of the best leaders that I knew, some of the young athletes who had the most potential are washing cars, they're unemployed, they're prison guards. They all graduated. And so according to any metrics you can find out there, we're all a success, yet we have very different life outcomes. So my question, specifically to President Emmert, but to anyone who would like to answer it, is do you feel that NCAA graduation rates and the current metrics that are published to the public are enough to truly gauge whether a team, a college, and a coach is doing enough to develop their athletes to be successful in after sports? And if not, what are the plans to produce more information to actually gauge and measure that?
Yeah, well, I'll take a stab at it, and these folks can answer too, because I think you're asking one of the most important questions right now. We know that we've seen over the past 15 years, really, way predates my role, all of the metrics of performance of student athletes while they're students go up. So graduation rates are way up. In fact, at most every university and college in the country, including Kansas, the student athletes have higher graduation rates than the rest of the student body. But what we don't have is what you're describing. In fact, when we're done here, I've got a couple people here I'd love you to talk to, because we have a program called, Life After the Game. So we're trying to track on that as well and trying to connect student athletes to create some support structures. But just sheer graduation rates don't begin to tell the story. we, the national office, don't have a good vehicle, don't have any vehicle really, to track what happens to alumni. The universities do, and they can track on it. So, but we've got to understand what's going on there and what the data really show. We'd love to work with you on a project like that.
Well, we on campus, we have been working on this very hard. We have so many alumni who are so successful across so many disciplines, who are interested in our athletics programs, and we try to match them up with kids. And bring in a guy who does logistics in Fairfield County. Bring him up to talk to the men's ice hockey team. And so we on campuses we can make those connections between our alumni base, which is so rich in experience and motivation. And what alum doesn't love to be asked to talk to student athletes and help them as compared to being asked for money? We always say, like, we want your time and your money, but this is a great way to harness all that alumni success directly for your student athletes. It's not that hard.
But it also has to start with the student athletes when you're a freshman, right?
Yes.
Because it is too hard. So hopefully now, starting this year, we've actually seen some significant rule changes around time demands, and so we don't. It makes no sense for a player to be putting in 40 hours a week, but nonetheless, we need to also get our athletic departments and coaches to understand that this isn't just about teaching you how to be a great basketball player. This is about helping you get ready for the rest of your life. And when that works, it's stunningly successful. And when it doesn't, you have these very mixed results that you're describing. And we need to find ways to get schools to understand what this task is really all about.
Playing the devil's advocate, the challenge is that no matter where you graduate from, whether you're a student athlete or not, the graduation is lumpy and uneven in terms of what all the graduates do. Many people have a degree from institution A or B, but some of the people that graduate do well and some don't do so well, depending on how you measure it. So, I think that employers are spending a lot of time trying to understand what your degree actually means to them. That's a whole nother seminar maybe for another day about, what is the quality of your actual degree. I go out what Mark said is, and I do think we can do better. But I'm really big, and Myron Roll is doing his, Myron, the Florida State kid, Rhodes Scholar, great guy. Just ask him, he's great. He'll tell you he's great. Myron's absolutely great. But we spent a lot of time talking about a sense of agency. I think it's okay to tell student athletes that you are responsible for getting a great education while you're here. Now, the challenge is all that noise of you're going to go pro and this, that, and the other, but it can be done. So to sit back and think, okay, you have all these things available to you to be able to have a certain end game. If you want to be a prison guard, that's fine. If you want to go to Harvard Business School, that's fine as well. We're going to give you the tools to do that. I think coaches are in the empowerment business, and I think 18-year-olds, including my own, can be responsible and thoughtful and can manage that when you set that culture from day one. And this is not to say that we don't press some people through, let some people through and let them graduate without getting a real degree. But I also want to come back to the person and say, you've got a responsibility to get a great education. It's all of these around you, all these pieces are around you.
Thanks for the question. We're going to go to this side of the room here.
Hi, thanks. Hi, my name's Maddie Mortimer, and I'm a former D1 student athlete. And during my time as a student athlete, I also served as an academic manager for the football and basketball team at my university. And during my role, it became apparent that the number of student athletes incoming who were academically disadvantaged outnumbered the number of academic support staff. There was only myself and a few others. So my question is, what are your thoughts on the concept of providing athletic departments a mechanism to support the augmentation of data collection and analysis to gain more insight into how these athletic departments can improve and optimize the resources that they have, particularly with these limited resource schools who are, we see a gap in academic performance in comparison to the other schools.
Thank you.
What do you want to take it?
That's such a tough issue because that gets at our society where we have communities that don't have access to the same educational opportunities at the high school level, grade school, that other communities have. And that, I think, is an issue for the campus at large generally. Where it comes into play in athletics is those students that may be not academically prepared enough to get admitted as a regular student have value as an athlete, and so they're put in a situation where it's incredibly challenging. So I can sit here in my Ivy League bubble and say you should only be admitting students that can do the work at your school, but that's not addressing the underlying issue that you're asking.
Oh, I think choosing people to go to school is very subjective anyway. I think that standardized tests and grade point averages are important, but grit is also very important. I mean, Tracy Duckworth's work on grit, tell me a kid who didn't go to a great school, made a B+ average, did okay in his SATs, and balls real hard. You bring that person to my school, I think they're going to do just fine. They're going to be gainfully employed when they graduate. So I got a little chip on my shoulder about, who's qualified or who's not qualified. Well, sometimes people have a certain last name and all of a sudden they're qualified. So I think there's an issue around there as well. But what we did at my institution, we had a one-time payout from the NCAA. They had some money on the balance sheet. They distributed it to all the D1 schools. We took our money and put it into an endowment specifically, and I think that the direction wasn't needed to support student athletes.
Yeah, it was just aimed at doing what you need to do on your campus to support your students.
So we're doing it for student success, and it's also the life skills piece and the academic piece. So it is tougher for us than some of the other schools that have more dollars, but in many ways, even though they have the time challenges, quite often the student athletes that are coming from, and by the way, 20% of students that come to college roughly need to go to remedial classes anyway. So it's not just a student athlete thing. But I think that quite often student athletes, even if it's marked that much more, they usually get more support than other folks do. So, it's a challenge. I think it's important for administrators to focus on it. But thank you for what you did by helping those student athletes. I'm sure they did a heck. What university did you attend, by the way?
Sam Houston State in Texas.
Oh, yeah, the great state of. All right.
I thought I recognized the Texas accent.
We're all staffed up on this because, it's important and we have to be, but I will say that I'm very dependent on our FAR, so it's mandated,
It's
right?
faculty athletic rep.
On every campus, and he's the guy we have has been at it for 15 years, I think. This is one of your leading faculty, full professor, walks the walk in every way, who watches over the student support on the athletic side, how students are doing, all the APR, all that stuff. You got to have that person. They got to be well supported. That guy knows he can come to me anytime and say, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, I'm worried about that coach, I'm worried about that kid. And the president better make sure that is an excellent person that has a lot of backbone.
We're going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions, sir, on this side of the room.
Well, maybe it's American exceptionalism, but in Europe and South America and other places, they have a much different system of youth athletic development. Here, the colleges serve as a kind of de facto minor league for the professional leagues, that top 3%, as you mentioned, and they're an attraction in their own right. But in Europe, the professional clubs, mainly in soccer, will sponsor youth academies. Everyone, no matter how big, will have a youth academy, and will sign youth at 12 years old. That's the average age, sometimes as young as 8 or 9 years old. And then they will be responsible for their development as athletes and also for taking care of their basic educational requirements, which is a much different system. But it also eliminates these kind of problems you talked about with professionalism, whether they should be paid, whether they get credit for classes they don't go to, and academic cheating and things like that, where you separate the top 3% and put them in a professional development program for athletics and let them develop from there. And then the college athletics programs is simply that, student athletes and not aspiring professionals. Is the European type of system a better way to approach athletic development for young people?
Well, I think it certainly has elements to recommend it for sure. It's interesting because the European and Asian universities right now are approaching us at the NCAA and elsewhere to try and emulate what we do. So, there's no perfect solution, but I think your point about whether it's 3% or whatever the right percentage is a really important one. We know if you look at men's basketball, for example, and the so-called one and done phenomenon, those are rules that are in place by the NBA and the NBA Players Association, not our rules. I think it makes absolutely no sense in the world to force somebody to go to college for 1 year or really just one semester that has no interest in being a college student. They just want to get to the NBA. And yet the system forces them to go over and touch that base and then go on. It makes a mockery of the whole relationship. So in those cases, I think you're spot on that we need to think about, are there other alternatives? If you look at the way baseball works in America, you can go right on a high school. They do have a developmental system and the minor league system. If you go to college, you got to stay 3 years. The majority of them have success and graduate in college. Some of them go on to play Major League Baseball. Most of them don't. That model works remarkably well in baseball. The hockey model is a little different, but it provides some of those same, similarities. U.S. soccer is a little bit different, obviously, but I think the biggest challenging one is football, because there's no developmental system for the NFL, right? The NFL rule is you got to go to college till you're a junior or 21 years of age, and so there's, I keep suggesting that the NFL buy Canadian football and turn it into the kind of program you're talking about. So football's a unique critter because an 18-year-old cannot possibly go step onto an NFL field and stay alive, but there's no other model for that. But I think we need to be a lot more creative about, especially around basketball, men's basketball, around the things you're talking about.
We have time for this last question.
Thank you. So I'm Matt Robinson, a student in the EPM program here at HGSE, former University of Tennessee volunteer. So I will take offense to UConn being the best.
Nice shirt.
But my question is going back to concussion talk. I'm sorry? Concussions. I have a brother who suffered 2 concussions on the college football field, was told he can't play again. And we talked a lot about research, we talked about diagnosis. I'm wondering about the support system after students leave college, and what are we doing at the university and the NCAA level of supporting those students as they move forward?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. There actually is a group, and I'm trying to remember the name of it now, that Harvard and Yale grads started that is geared at exactly that. It's a it's a young alumni-run group to try and provide that support. And I met them at a concussion summit we had with the Big Ten this summer. They're phenomenal. And it is something we need to pay attention to and figure out how to connect, because they've gone through something that is debilitating. And the effects can be long-term. They're not for everyone. Some people recover very well, and others have long-term effects. And if I could remember the name of this organization, I wish I could, because I'd love for your brother to connect with them.
Did your brother keep playing after? Did he stay on the team? What year?
He got put on a medical scholarship.
Okay, so did he keep his affiliation with the team?
He did, yes.
Yeah, because one of my biggest concern, one of my concerns is that if it happens to somebody early in their career, and then they don't play, and then they drift. And they drift away from the team. They're not insulated, they're isolated, and some really bad things can happen. I had a student at my previous institution. I mean, his whole identity was being the quarterback. His whole life he'd been told you're going to be the quarterback. And he wasn't going to be playing pro, but he wanted to have a great college career. And until we could kind of redirect him, I remember his mom calling me in my office and saying, Johnny just really doesn't have a sense of purpose anymore. Going back to what we said before about sports, you can get a very good sense of purpose and drive to do your homework, to work hard, to be eligible, what have you. So I'm concerned about those folks, and that's when you see it happen, where coaches and administrators and athletic administration speak to student life and bring them in and make sure they can kind of redirect and keep an eye on them.
And I think, related to that, whether it's a concussion or any kind of injury, that's sustained when you're playing sport, we need to make sure that first and foremost, while you're a student athlete, that there's all the appropriate insurance and support systems to deal with those issues, because they can be, they can have really significant costs associated with them. But a lot of schools and even some whole conferences now are also extending their medical insurance to a number of years after you finished up your career, because some things don't show up until, a little bit after. Concussion would be an interesting example of that. And then layered on top of that, and Harvard suffered this horrible football accident this year. When you have some catastrophic injuries, the NCAA as an association has lifelong insurance coverage, and it also includes disability insurance for those people that have suffered some really catastrophic injuries. So we've got to have those things layered in the right place. We do at least in our research of what schools are doing. We do have it in most every place, but we got to have complete surety of that.
Please join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you.
And I invite anybody who has a couple of moments to come up and say hello, but thank you so much for coming this evening. I appreciate it.